Hey, I apologize if the sound is not the best. I am in a room with servers and it is quite noisy in here. But let me know in the comments. I will try to upgrade my recording software in the future, hopefully. If this takes off, I enjoy reading. I would probably read out loud more if it didn't if it didn't interrupt my wife's thoughts and what she was doing. So yeah, here I go. So this is Ouspensky explaining to Gurdjieff what his aim in life is, and not the ethereal aim, like not the meaning of life, but what do you want to do? What do you want to do when you grow up? Kind of question. And Ouspensky says, I would like to know the future. That's kind of what defines his aims. And continue here in Search of the Miraculous, chapter 6. I concluded from this that we ought, and that we have a right to know the future, and that until we do know it, we shall not be able to organize our lives. A great deal was connected for me this question. I considered, for instance, that a man can know, and has a right to know, exactly how much time is left to him, how much time he has at his disposal, or, in other words, he can and has a right to know the day and hour of his death. I always thought it humiliating for a man to live without knowing this, and I decided at one time not to begin doing anything in any sense whatever until I did know it. That's quite a statement. For what is the good of beginning any kind of work when one doesn't know whether one will have time to finish it or not? Very well, said G. To know the future is the first aim. Who else can formulate his aim? This is in quotes. I should like to be convinced that I shall go on existing after the death of the physical body. Or, if this depends on me, I should like to work in order to exist after death, said one of the company. I don't care whether I know the future or not, or whether I am certain or not certain of life after death, said another, if I remain what I am now. What I feel most strongly is that I am not master of myself. And if I were to formulate my aim, I should say that I want to be master of myself. I should like to understand the teaching of Christ and to be a Christian in the true sense of the term, said the next. I should like to be able to help people, said another. I should like to know how to stop wars, said another. Well, that's enough, said G. We have now sufficient material to go on with. The best formulation of those that have been put forward is the wish to be one's own master. Without this, nothing else is possible, and without this, nothing else will have any value. But let us begin with the first question, or the first aim. In order to know the future, it is necessary first to know the present in all its details, as well as to know the past. Today is what it is because yesterday was what it was. And if today is like yesterday, tomorrow will be like today. If you want tomorrow to be different, you must make today different. If today is simply a consequence of yesterday, tomorrow will be a consequence of today in exactly the same way. And if one has studied thoroughly what happened yesterday, the day before yesterday, a week ago, a year, 10 years ago, one can say unmistakably what will and what will not happen tomorrow. But at present, we have not sufficient material at our disposal to discuss this question seriously. What happens or may happen to us may depend on three causes: upon accident, upon fate, or upon our own will. Such as we are almost wholly dependent upon accident. We can have no fate in the real sense of the word any more than we can have will. If we had will, then through this alone we should know the future, because we should then make our future and make it such as we want it to be. If we had fate, we could also know the future, because fate corresponds to type. If the type is known, then its fate can be known, that is, both the past and the future. But accidents cannot be foreseen. Today a man is, tomorrow he is different. Today one thing happens to him, tomorrow another. But are you not able to foresee what is going to happen to each of us? Somebody asked. That is to say, foretell what result each of us will reach in work on himself, and whether it is possible, whether it is worth his while to begin work. So they're kind of grasping here, right? Like they're looking at Gurdjieff like a leader, and they're saying, can't you tell us what we are? Well, can't you tell us what our futures are? It is impossible to say, said Gurdjieff. One can only foretell the future for men. It is impossible to foretell the future for mad machines. Their direction changes every moment. At one moment, a machine of this kind is going in one direction, and you can calculate where it can get to. But 5 minutes later, it is already going in quite a different direction, and all your calculations prove to be wrong. Therefore, before talking about knowing the future, one must know whose future is meant. If a man wants to know his own future, he must first of all know himself. Then he will see whether it is worth his while to know the future. Sometimes, maybe, it is better not to know it. It sounds paradoxical, but we have every right to say that we know our future. It will be exactly the same as our past has been. Nothing can change of itself. And in practice, in order to study the future, one must learn to notice and to remember the moments when we really know the future and when we act in accordance with this knowledge. Then, judging by the results, it will be possible to demonstrate that we really do know the future. This happens in a simple way in business, for instance. Every good commercial businessman knows the future. If he does not know the future, his business goes smash. In work on oneself, one must be a good businessman, a good merchant. And knowing the future is worthwhile only when a man can be his own master. There was a question here about the future life, about how to create it, how to avoid final death, how not to die. For this, it is necessary to be. If a man is changing every minute, if there is nothing in him that can withstand external influences, it means that there is nothing in him that can withstand death. But if he becomes independent of external influences, if there appears in him something that can live by itself, this something may not die. In ordinary circumstances, we die every moment. External influences change, and we change with them. That is, many of our eyes die. If a man develops in himself a permanent eye that can survive a change in external conditions, it can survive the death of the physical body. The whole secret is that one cannot work for a future life without working for this one. In working for life, a man works for death, or rather, for immortality. Therefore, work for immortality, if one may so call it, cannot be separated from general work. In attaining the one, a man attains the other. A man may strive to be simply for the sake of his own life's interests. Through this alone, he may become immortal. We do not speak specially of a future life, and we do not study whether it exists or not, because the laws are everywhere the same. In studying his own life as he knows it, and the lives of other men from birth to death, a man is studying all the laws which govern life and death and immortality. If he becomes the master of his life, he may become the master of his death. Another question was how to become a Christian. First of all, it is necessary to understand that a Christian is not a man who calls himself a Christian or whom others call a Christian. A Christian is one who lives in accordance with Christ's precepts. Such as we are, we cannot be Christians. In order to be Christians, we must be able to do. We cannot do. With us, everything happens. Christ says, love your enemies. But how can we love our enemies when we cannot even love our friends? Sometimes it loves, and sometimes it does not love. Such as we are, we cannot even really desire to be Christians because, again, sometimes it desires, and sometimes it does not desire. And one and the same thing cannot be desired for long, because suddenly, instead of desiring to be a Christian, a man remembers a very good but very expensive carpet that he has seen in a shop. And instead of wishing to be a Christian, he begins to think how he can manage to buy this carpet, forgetting all about Christianity. Or if somebody else does not believe what a wonderful Christian he is, he will be ready to eat him alive or to roast him on hot coals. In order to be a good Christian, one must be. To be means to be master of oneself. If a man is not his own master, he has nothing and can have nothing. and he cannot be a Christian. He is simply a machine, an automaton. A machine cannot be a Christian. Think for yourselves. Is it possible for a motor car or a typewriter or a gramophone to be a Christian? They are simply things which are controlled by chance. They are not responsible. They are machines. To be a Christian means to be responsible. Responsibility comes later, when a man even partially ceases to be a machine and begins, in fact, not only in words, to desire to be a Christian. What is the relation of the teaching you are expounding to Christianity as we know it? Asks somebody present. Or what is the relation of the teaching you are expounding to Christianity as we know it? I think that's how I'm supposed to intonate that question. I do not know what you know about Christianity, answered G, emphasizing this word. It would be necessary to talk a great deal and to talk for a long time in order to make clear what you understand by this term. But for the benefit of those who know already, I will say that if you like, this is esoteric Christianity. We will talk in due course about the meaning of these words. At present, we will continue to discuss our questions. And I just want to pause there. My last video the other day was about Richard Smoley's, it's called Inner Christianity. And really the words inner in the context of Christianity and esoteric are interchangeable. In case you're wondering, there's no difference. Smoley says this in his book, Inner Christianity. And I'm just going to read this. These are just my thoughts. I like to do what's called the morning pages, recommended by Julia Cameron. And it's kind of a free form stream of consciousness writing, or say a light bulb goes off, an aha moment. It's just getting the pen to the paper and getting it down. I do this for healing. I do this so I don't go crazy, so that my thoughts don't start generating this strange chatter in my brain. So here we go. Because we tend to be fooled by appearances and tend to think of the body boundary as a border around an end-all be-all and value the individual above the community and its heritage, we fall under the impression that people like Jesus or the Buddha came up with ideas or were given revelation that no other person was feeling or expressing at or before their time. And I put in parentheses, the branding and marketing illusion. So, I mean, you can think of in sense like when a brand comes out and says, we're the only ones doing this. And then the disillusionment comes that you find out many people are doing this. Or Thomas Edison and the light bulb. And then you have the camp of people that are, no, Tesla came up with this idea. It's been talked about before that maybe this is how knowledge is dispensed, that there are in fact many corners of the globe where people are thinking of things at present. Dolores Cannon, the leader of the quantum healing, if you're familiar with her material, she puts it as this, that bodies, that we are vessels for information, and that there are entities, disembodied entities is a good way to put it, that are dispensing the information. People all the way back to Thomas Aquinas, the Catholics. This is a way of, Plato discusses in his theory of forms. That's another way of thinking about it, that we are given information. We don't just hatch information. It doesn't just happen to us in a vacuum. So that's kind of what I'm saying here, right? That people like Jesus the Christ, or the Buddha, may very well be representations or the spearhead of a whole group of thought that was starting to bud in different minds of people, if that makes sense. And that the reason that Jesus the Christ or the Buddha or Muhammad during his time of Islam, the reason they started to gain such a following is because of this pre-hatched or budding thoughts that were starting to bud. That's the only way I can put it. The buddings of thoughts were happening in various disciples, or even the detractors who were starting to have these play around, starting to simulate these thoughts in their minds prior to Jesus even coming. I mean, John the Baptist goes into, can't remember which gospel, it might be Matthew. He's already aware that somebody will come and be Jesus the Christ. And he talks about it before he's even met him. Okay, so I mean, that's kind of what I'm talking about here. It's if you want to think about the Bible as symbolic, I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but if you think of the Bible as symbolic, there are plenty of verses that talk about how we're not just coming up with thoughts in a vacuum. When we say, oh, the Buddha or the Jesus the Christ, and we sort of we put a heroic bubble around someone. We're doing it right now with Gurdjieff and Ouspensky. It's much wiser to think about these teachings as already being out there, as flowing. I mean, people all over might be having dreams about this stuff, right? It's just crystallized. It's put into words under someone's name. It falls under someone's name. And I think that's because we have the tendency to hero worship. We have the tendency to need a figure, a name. Kind of like how in when Moses is seeing the burning bush, and it's God telling him to bring the Israelites out of Egypt, he asks God, well, what can I call you? What's your name? And God just simply says, I am, or I am that I am. But that goes to show you that there's this want, there's this need to have a name of something. So I just found that I needed to write that down as in terms of this inner Christianity was something that came up to me. The individual does not come up with thoughts, I said, but instead has a chance and set of chances, but also falls under grace, meaning by no choices, to receive that which is dispensed, incorporeal, timeless, and can be claimed by no individual. What if the word salvation had more to do with the word salve? This is kind of a separate topic, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it. What if the word salvation had more to do with the word salve, like a hand salve, than it did saving from hell, as in the Hollywood way of seeing it, or Dante in his Inferno? As in revivifying organic matter to a healthy, glowing state, not a dualism, right? So the word Christ means chrism, which means the anointed one, which has to do with oil. So it's possible, right? My goal is to try to find out, if I can, what was the original teaching of Christianity, because I do not believe it's present a lot of the times in churches. It hasn't been made available to me, right? I'm doing my own individual seeking. I want to get away from judging, right? I have no idea what's really going on in the churches. I don't go and visit them. This is my own personal path. And it seems to me that the word Christ goes back to what the Greek word means, the anointed one. And anointing had to do with oil. Why would we put oil on someone? You might say, well, it's just a tradition. It's what the priesthood did. We put oil on someone's head, right? But you got to think back, okay? What do Jews wear in their to make them Jewish, or to show that they're Jewish? They wear a skull cap, right? What were people doing a lot before they had beautiful buildings to shelter them? They were out in the sun, okay? This right here is exposed to that hot sun, okay? So it's only natural, just as we get dry skin from working with our hands or get sunburns, right? They didn't have this strong SPF. I mean, who knows what they had, right? But the point is that just like we use lotions now, people needed a salve for their head. And I think they instinctively understood that when you get a dry, flaky scalp, it's not a good thing. You're in a sense losing your shield. You're losing part of your first house. Let's just call it that. The Jewish letter bet means house, and you come out of your mother's womb. But then once you're out of your mother's womb, your first house is your skin, your person, your body, right? And if the top of your head is flaking off and burnt from the sun, it's only natural that we're going to put some kind of salve on it, right? So this was a blessing. This was a blessing that the church did for people as they washed their feet, right? Because they walked a lot in sandals. And so it would just be really interesting. It would be an interesting, ironic turn of events if salvation meant, they call it a covering. Christians often call it a covering. They use this language. Covering for the head, a salve, an oil, a chrism. When we are exposed to the sun, right, which gives all life, which illuminates all, right? If it wasn't for the sun, everything would be dark. Everything would be, we wouldn't have anything to, right? The solar system would be non-existent. It's the solar system. So the sun is everything, really. Yet we cannot be under it without being damaged by it, right? And so we need this covering. We need this salve. So I'll just keep going on. As in revivifying organic matter to a healthy, glowing state, not a dualism, not a I'm going to heaven or hell in the sense of salvation. It's not a doctrine of once accepted, always reserved for St. Peter's pearly gates, but like taking lizard skin or dry skin and making it soft again, making it supple, making it healthy. Is it possible that Jesus is a dream given to many people? Okay, so this is kind of me playing with the idea that perhaps there's a movie out that came out recently with Nicolas Cage where everyone dreams about him. Everyone starts having dreams of Nicolas Cage. It's not, he plays this very normal guy. I haven't seen the movie. I really do want to see it. And I can't even remember what it's called at the moment. But everyone starts having dreams of him, and they tell him, and he starts appearing on talk shows. He kind of gains this notoriety. Some people are pissed off at him, right? Because people are having all kinds of dreams about him. Some of them are erotic, some of them are terrifying, some of them are just whatever. This is what I can glean from the previews. Okay, so take this concept of sort of a phenomena of everyone dreaming of the same person. Okay. What if everyone had this dream that was presented in the Gospels, that there was this man who was born of a virgin, who started to perform miracles, who gained a following, who raised people from the dead, who was hated by the powers that be, that was crucified, which was a thing in Roman law and punishment, was dead for 3 days, and then rose again. And I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers here. Notice I'm not saying it didn't happen in real life. I'm trying to focus on the fact of what if this was a phenomenological dream that many people were starting to have. Kind of going back to my idea of kind of like the light bulb, right? That Thomas Edison and Tesla both came up with. What if this was a dream that many people were having, okay? If many people during the same time have lucid, quote unquote, like Jungian alchemical dreams about physical torture and suffering and resurrection, it is a dispensation of knowledge that leads to revivification of the organism. Okay, so I just want to say all my ideas here that I'm getting down, which are not my ideas, they They were dispensed to me. Information is dispensed to us, okay? We have no idea. You know, we look at history with our eyes now, and we're in wonderment about it, right? We think, why do people talk a certain way on the radio? Why did people talk a certain way and then it changed? Why did people wear certain clothes then and fashion evolves? And why did people do these funny customs and habits here in our country 50 years ago? Perhaps it's the dream world. Perhaps it's this world that we don't have conscious corporeal access to, but it's information being kind of downloaded into our consciousness, okay? So I'll just kind of stop there. I had this thing written up about, I wanted to read my stuff for you because I thought it had something to do with Richard Smoley. I'm kind of getting away from that. That's okay. Maybe I'll find it. I don't know. I guess I had it written down in another notebook, if possible. And that's totally fine. I don't want to get too off track here. But let's see. This might be it. I'll go ahead and just read my own writing here, because why not, right? That's what this stream is about. The representation of the Pope of the Catholic Church sets the stage for an esoteric interpretation that Jesus alone is God, and we are all lowly sinners, some of us more lowly than others. Pastors and priests, bishops and monks, of course, are naturally thought to be less so or more blessed. The concept of a human being, a God, is usually thought of as heretical by Christians, yet Jesus himself quotes the Psalms by saying it. My question asked, and getting into the names that were dropped, Eugene Genlin and Richard Smoley, have led me to a place where I see that the miracles talked about in the New Testament are happening right now. The miraculous is all around us, but things are miracles inasmuch as they are weird, mundane, or boring. These are all perceptions and depend on the position the observer takes when making them. To Jesus, they were not miracles, but merely demonstrations, because his message was that this world of dense matter is not eternal. We all believe he is right, Christians, yet we do not live as if it is so. The path is called narrow, not in the sick way, not in the quote-unquote sick way that Kierkegaard describes, self-righteous. So I'm agreeing with Kierkegaard here, that the narrow way is not the self-righteous, what Kierkegaard would call a sickness unto death, self-deluding, in judgment of others, but is narrow as in the Buddhist Eightfold Path to enlightenment. It is narrow as in the teachings of the sutras. It is narrow because the world of ocular visions is tantalizing, the sensations of the flesh much more so, as well as they are linked. They have compounded force in guiding the individual away from renunciation and pursuing the invisible. So, chocolate, sex, things like that. They have compounded force in guiding the individual away from renunciation, which is Buddhism and Christianity, and pursuing renunciation and pursuing the invisible, right? This would be the path. The invisible is all there is, for everything comes from it, and to it everything shall return. Another very helpful teaching had been what little I read from A Veil of Isis by Pierre Hadot, beginning with Heraclitus's aphorism, and this is some ancient Greek here, Fusis crupistae filii, usually translated as nature loves to hide. All right, so I'm going to stop there and get back to Gurdjieff. I don't know if anyone's following this. That's fine. I'm just trying to get this down. These are kind of like notes, video notes. And if somebody wants to join the discussion, that would be awesome. You know, because I'm really just spilling out stuff that goes on in my mind, what I really care about, what my, I guess if Gurdjieff was in front of me right now and he asked me what my aim was, I would be the person that says, I want to be my own master. I want to be master of myself. And I do like that that's the one he kind of picks out and says, let's go with that one. And then really just attacks it and says, you know, the chances are you are not master of yourself. So you can't call yourself a Christian. You can call yourself someone who wants to be a Christian. One of my favorite quotes from Thomas Merton. Let me just read it real quick. Wants to be. Let's see if I can find it this way. It's a quote that comes up all the time. It was a prayer, I think, actually. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Oh, man, I love this. Man, Thomas Merton is one of my favorite writers. All right, the Merton Prayer, it's called. My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I am actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road. Though I may know nothing about it, therefore will I trust you always, though I may seem to be lost in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone. So I don't know if that's the exact one I was thinking of. I mean, that's beautiful. That's a prayer that I really like to repeat often. I think it's sort of a condensed quote of the one I was thinking of, and that's fine. I love the concept of the humility there, right? I mean, what is humility? It's not this display, this virtue signaling of like, look what I'm doing for other people. Look how much I'm self-deprecating. I don't believe in myself. That's humility, right? No. Someone said in a meeting that I was in the other day, I believe humility is self-awareness, real self-awareness. And that's not easy. I think that's the narrow road. Well, that's the beginning of it. And I think few of us are far along that road. I think perhaps the best posture to be for most people is to just be in this posture. I have no idea where this road is headed. I don't know where it's going to lead. And I don't even know myself. But the fact that I think I am following your will, Lord God, and the fact, so this is another piece of humility, the fact that I think I am following your will, Lord God, does not mean that I'm actually doing so, right? So it's this openness to be corrected. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you, right? And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. And I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road. Though I may know nothing about it, Therefore will I trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone. Okay. All right. So let's get back to this amazing book, In Search of the Miraculous, by P.D. Ouspensky, where he is getting the ideas of Gurdjieff out there for the public. They're sort of like memoirs for when he got to know this man. Okay. Of the desires expressed, the one which is most right is the desire to be master of oneself, because without this, nothing else is possible. And in comparison with this, all other desires are simply childish dreams, desires of which a man could make no use, even if they were granted to him. It was said, for instance, that somebody wanted to help people. In order to be able to help people, one must first learn to help oneself. A great number of people become absorbed in thoughts and feelings about helping others simply out of laziness. They are too lazy to work on themselves, and at the same time, it is very pleasant for them to think that they are able to help others. This is being false and insincere with oneself. If a man looks at himself as he really is, he will not begin to think of helping other people. He will be ashamed to think about it. Love of mankind, altruism are all very fine words, but they only have meaning when a man is able of his own choice and of his own decision to love or not to love, to be an altruist or an egoist. Then his choice has a value. But if there is no choice at all, if he cannot be different, if he is only such as chance has made or is making him, an altruist today, an egoist tomorrow, again an altruist the day after tomorrow, then there is no value in it whatever. In order to help others, one must first learn to be an egoist, a conscious egoist. Only a conscious egoist can help people. Such as we are, we can do nothing. A man decides to be an egoist, but gives away his last shirt instead. I'm going to read that sentence again. A man decides to be an egoist, but gives away his last shirt instead. He decides to give away his last shirt, but instead, he strips of his last shirt the man to whom he meant to give his own. So he's saying the back and forth. So one day a man decides to be an egoist, but gives away his last. So this would be the kind of betraying, right? When you do something you don't really want to do. So a man decides to be an egoist, but gives away his last shirt instead. Maybe it's to look a certain way. Maybe it's because he feels like it's the right thing to do in that moment, but he's conflicted. He decides to give away his last shirt, but instead he strips of his last shirt the man to whom he meant to give his own, right? So he's kind of putting it in that way. Or he decides to give away his own shirt, but gives away somebody else's and is offended if somebody refuses to give him his shirt so that he may give it to another. This is what happens most often, and so it goes on. And above all, in order to do what is difficult, one must first learn to do what is easy. One cannot begin with the most difficult. There was a question about war, how to stop wars. Wars cannot be stopped. War is the result of the slavery in which men live. Strictly speaking, men are not to blame for war. War is due to cosmic forces, to planetary influences. But in men, there is no resistance whatever against these influences, and there cannot be any, because men are slaves. If they were men and were capable of doing, they would be able to resist these influences and refrain from killing one another. But surely those who realize this can do something, said the man who had asked the question about war. If a sufficient number of men came to a definite conclusion that there should be no war, could they not influence others? Those who dislike war have been trying to do so almost since the creation of the world, said Gurdjieff. And yet there has never been such a war as the present. Wars are not decreasing, they are increasing, and war cannot be stopped by ordinary means. All these theories about universal peace, about peace conferences, and so on are again simply laziness and hypocrisy. These are not my words, okay? This is Gurdjieff. Men do not want to think about themselves, do not want to work on themselves, but think of how to make other people do what they want. If a sufficient number of people who wanted to stop war really did gather together, they would first of all begin by making war upon those who disagreed with them. And it is still more certain that they would make war on people who also want to stop wars, but in another way. And so they would fight. Men are what they are, and they cannot be different. War has many causes that are unknown to us. Some causes are in men themselves, others are outside them. One must begin with the causes that are in man himself. How can he be independent of the external influences of great cosmic forces when he is the slave of everything that surrounds him? He is controlled by everything around him. If he becomes free from things, he may then become free from planetary influences. So, I mean, the first 5 chapters of the book kind of goes into Ouspensky, why he was interested in the esoteric. It led him to Egypt. It led him to India. I relate a lot to him, right? It was like he didn't really fall in this, like, I want to be a car salesman. I want to be an executive, account executive. He was like, I don't know. I don't know what I want. I guess I just want this esoteric knowledge. And then it led him to meeting Gurdjieff. And this meeting with Gurdjieff lasted a long time, and getting to know Gurdjieff and leading up to these meetings, which sort of chapters 2 through 5, I guess, a lot of esoteric gobbledygook, I'll call it. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that any normie who listened, if I was reading aloud these chapters, I mean, it's I don't know, it's things like the moon having influence on us. That's a basic concept, but you know, it's these planetary influences. And if anyone has seriously gotten into the serious study of astrology, you know, it's like it's very dry. It's very dry stuff. I mean, I certainly can't visualize this stuff, and so to me, it's very dry. But I just wanted a side note on when he says these planetary influences. There is plenty in the book that talks about planetary influences. It makes not a lick of sense to me. Not until I got to this chapter 6 did I start. My eyes got wide, and I started tuning in. And that's not to say I won't go back to those chapters previous, right? Freedom, liberation. This must be the aim of man. To become free, to be liberated from slavery, this is what a man ought to strive for when he becomes even a little conscious of his position. There is nothing else for him, and nothing else is possible so long as he remains a slave both inwardly and outwardly. But he cannot cease to be a slave outwardly while he remains a slave inwardly. Therefore, in order to become free, man must gain inner freedom. Remember, I said, like, the skin, our bodies, this is our first house, right? To be a master of the house means to have your house organized, clean, a function, not dysfunctional, but functional, right? So he's talking about the inward body, the inward soul, the inward psyche, the inward life. He's more or less repeating that phrase, know thyself, which was at the Oracle of Delphi. It was kind of like, hey, all these people came to the Oracle of Delphi for some, mind-blowing revelation. And I take it as like, hey, this is all you really need to know. Just follow what this, it's like a big fortune cookie, know thyself. And that's what more or less Gurdjieff is saying here. And he's saying, like, don't gloss over that phrase. Don't say, oh, yeah, know thyself. Yeah, sure. I journal. I do some inward dialoguing with myself. I'll be the first to say, I'll just kind of do some vulnerability here. I'm in that Thomas Merton phase, possibly. Sometimes, I'm more in what Gurdjieff was saying before, where some days I'm in the Thomas Merton phase, and the next day I'm in the middle finger to the world phase. The past few days I've been in the I can't even wake up phase. No matter how much coffee I drink, I'm bumping into things. I can't remember dates. That's the phase. That's the kind of place I'm in right now. That's the state I'm in. So I'd like to get it out while it's fresh, while it's budding. I'm not into self-condemnation. I think that life is all about growth, and life is a garden. Voltaire says at the end of Candide. Let's keep our gardens well pruned. Let's create beautiful gardens here. So therefore, in order to become free, man must gain inner freedom. The first reason for man's inner slavery is his ignorance, and above all, his ignorance of himself. Without self-knowledge, without understanding the working and functions of his machine, man cannot be free. And I believe he's relating not only to the physical body, as in exercise or yoga, but he's also talking about the machine that he's more talking about the machine that he was referring to before, which is, are we even aware of our own egos? There's a phrase in F. Scott Fitzgerald's Great Gatsby, which I love, the wife who has the idiot husband, that kind of all ties in at the end. She says to him, "You're so dumb, you don't even know you're alive." That's a great quote right there. That's kind of what Gurdjieff is saying here. You're so dumb, you don't even know you're alive. So until you wake up to what it means to be alive, and wake up to your chains and your slavery, as in Plato's cave allegory, you cannot govern yourself, and you will always remain a slave and the plaything of the forces acting upon you. This is why in all ancient teachings, the first demand at the beginning of the way to liberation was, know thyself. We shall speak of these words now. The next lecture began precisely with the words, know thyself. These words, said G, which are generally ascribed to Socrates, actually lie at the basis of many systems and schools far more ancient than the Socratic. But although modern thought is aware of the existence of this principle, it is only a very vague idea of its meaning and significance. The ordinary man of our times, even a man with philosophic or scientific interest, does not realize that the principle know thyself speaks of the necessity of knowing one's machine, the human machine. Machines are made more or less the same way in all men. Therefore, before anything else, man must study the structure, the functions, and the laws of his organism. In the human machine, everything is so interconnected, one thing is so dependent upon another, that it is quite impossible to study any one function without studying all the others. In order to know one thing, one must know everything. To know everything in man is possible, but it requires much time and labor, and above all, the application of the right method, and what is equally necessary, right guidance. Whew. I mean, isn't that kind of what's always in the back of our minds, right? I'm assuming if you're tuning in right now, you are a very thoughtful person. Isn't that always in the back of your mind? God, if I could only just find the right person to guide me, to teach me at all. And this is something we instinctively know. And I really do feel like most everything I've read from Gurdjieff so far that gets me tuned in, it's like, harkens back to Plato saying all learning is remembering, right? So it's something we know deep down inside. We just need to wake up to these facts. Because I'm not going to get on a soapbox right now, but the things that comfort us enable us to be asleep. The principle, know thyself, embraces a very rich content. It demands in the first place that a man who wants to know himself should understand what this means, with what is connected and what it necessarily depends on. Knowledge of oneself is a very big, but a very vague and distant aim. Man in his present state is very far from self-knowledge. Therefore, strictly speaking, his aim cannot even be defined as self-knowledge. Self-study must be his big aim. It is quite enough if a man understands that he must study himself. It must be man's aim. I'm sorry. Let me read that sentence again. It is quite enough if a man understands that he must study himself, it must be man's aim to begin to study himself, to know himself in the right way. So if I had to pit Gurdjieff and Thomas Merton, at least the Thomas Merton prayer, against each other, I would say that Gurdjieff, right now, it's the godless path, at least the way he's talking about it. It's the godless path. And I'm not sure where he's going with it, but it goes right in line with Thomas Merton. But Thomas Merton takes a posture of, there's no way. He's kind of a meekness, like, I'm sort of a lost child, lost in the big supermarket of life, but I do have faith that this hand here that's guiding me, the one true God, that in that good faith, he will lead me to it. It not only pleases him that I have this good faith, but he will lead me to the right ways. I mean, that's really what the modern definition of faith is. Gurdjieff is more, this would be more Gnosticism. He would say, that's fine. You know, I think he would say that. I don't know if he's really addressing that right now, but he'd probably say, that's fine. That's the very start. And if you did want to venture inward to know, you could know. Whereas Merton is kind of saying, like, I'll never know, so I got to have faith. And Gurdjieff is saying, you can know, right? Like when Carl Jung was asked about, like, do you believe in God? His quote is, I don't need to believe, I know. Which is a similar, I think, if you can honestly, like Jung, if you read Depth Psychology and Jung, it was parallel. He got to know the thyself, and in turn, he felt like he got to know God. He didn't need to believe God. He got to know the depth of the psyche to such an extent that he didn't need this faith, this childlike faith. But it's not an arrogance either. It's this other way. It's this other way, right? And I would say neither the childlike faith of Merton is not something that I would say is incorrect. But I kind of want to pull in this thread of Gurdjieff a lot. I mean, Thomas Merton wrote plenty of books that I have. I own many of them, and he is a great contemplative mystic, and I think goes right in line. But I'm just that prayer and what Gurdjieff is saying right here. If we can hermetically seal each, which we can't, of course. Self-study is the work or the way which leads to self-knowledge. But in order to study oneself, one must first learn how to study, where to begin, what methods to use. A man must learn how to study himself, and he must study the methods of self-study. So a man must learn how to study himself, and he must study the methods of self-study. Okay? Sorry, getting like, I miss things as I'm reading, and then I get excited because I'm like, what? Whoa. The chief method of self-study is self-observation. Without properly applied self-observation, a man will never understand the connection and the correlation between the various functions of his machine. Will never understand how and why on each separate occasion everything in him happens. So I'm going to end there. I have no idea if anyone tuned in the whole time while I was presenting. That's totally fine. You know, like, I'm doing this for me. It's kind of a video journal that might turn into more people tuning in. I want to read the Merton prayer one more time. This is from the Reflections Journal website from Yale. Reflections Journal is produced twice a year as a public service of Yale Divinity School. Each free issue seeks to bring theological insight to a contemporary social, political, or religious question. This is from the issue called Seize the Day, Vacation, Calling, Work. Issue season spring in 2012. My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I'm actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road. Though I may know nothing about it, therefore will I trust you always. Though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death, I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone. Let me just get one more prayer up, if I can find it. This is in 12 step. I'm not sure if I can find it. Let's see. God help me to so that I have a new experience. I always forget the wording of this. Step. If I had my big book with me, only. Yeah, here we go. Nice. Set aside. It's called the set aside prayer. Okay, this is a beautiful prayer that my first sponsor wrote in the front of my big book, my copy of AA, when I first started recovery. And this is so beautiful. Dear God, please help me to set aside everything I think I know about myself, my disease, and especially you, so I may have an open mind and a new experience. Please help me to see the truth about myself, my disease, especially you. You know, it's not exactly how my first sponsor worded this prayer. I'd love to find it. I don't have the book with me. I don't think. It's too bad. I should always have that copy with me. And I'll read it on another stream because it's beautiful. Whew, I'm going to stop there. I got to get some food in me. I got to leave, make it to a meeting. Thanks for tuning in. I mean, what are you supposed to say when you end these things? I love you guys. Smash the like. Hit subscribe. You know, I don't know. I'm just doing this for myself. I'm doing it but in the same way, I'm doing it for, I'm one of those people in Gurdjieff's group. I want to help people, but it's so naive, right? Like some days I'm like, everybody's so stupid or everybody hates me, right? Nobody's smiling at me. Everyone just thinks I'm a piece of crap. And then other days I'm like, I got the light of the world. I just want to help everybody. So I want to wake up. And I do believe that maybe we can wake up together, or maybe there's someone out there that can shed some insight, give me some stuff that'll help. That's why I go to meetings, AA meetings. I obviously do not share for a total of 1 hour at AA meetings, but that's why I'm doing this. So know thyself. That's how I'll end this. Know thyself.